have two roles on a committee, and it's unusual. In most not-for-profits where there's staff, the staff do the operations and the board does the strategic role. And boards struggle staying up in strategy anyway. But when you don't have staff, you have to do both jobs, and it's a really difficult balance. On top of that, you almost always spend all of your time in operations, because operations is the doing the thing. So for most clubs, by the time you get through doing the thing, the last thing you want to do is talk about it. But I can guarantee that if you have a strategic plan and you use it, it will make your life easier, not harder. It just takes a bit of commitment. So the way that they normally work, if you've never had a strategic plan before, is that you're really thinking about what the club will do in the coming 3 to 5 years, somewhere around there. And then every year underneath that, you'll have an operational plan. And that's really the doing. So in strategy, we say we're going to do a particular thing, and I'll show you a plan later so you can see what I'm talking about. And then the operational plan will be, well, how are we going to do it? What are the little steps that we'll take to get there? So even if you've got a great plan at the moment, it's very likely that big chunks of it are going to be meaningless. And so that's really what we're going to cover tonight. How to stay focused on a plan that you already have, whether you even should stay focused on that plan, how to innovate and change things that looked like they were a good idea way back in February in a different life, how to re-energize your members. And for me, I think that's one of the challenges we're experiencing right now. Everyone seems very excited in the media about the idea of community getting back out there. And, you know, that's everything from people just desperately wanting to go to restaurants and cafes, to getting back to community sport, to getting back into the men's sheds or the CWA. And the evidence is just not there at the moment that that is actually what the community wants. You know, and I think restaurants and cafes are finding out that when we said we wanted to go out for dinner, we wanted to go out for dinner like it was in February, not like it is now. And so much has changed, and our clubs are the same. When we talk about going back to our clubs, we're often thinking that we'll just open the door and it will be like it used to be. And if we've learned anything over the last few weeks, it's that that's not exactly how it's going to be. So we're going to talk about all of these challenges. Hopefully I can give you some good solutions that will help you pivot and move a little bit. So you're still staying focused on what you've got to do, but maybe only biting off as much as you can chew, not too much. And then how to do a plan. If you've never done a plan, at the end of this hour, you should be able to do a really simple one yourself. And you might have to do it, even if you've got a great one, because yours will look completely different. I really liked this quote because I think it sums up the situation at the moment, that really, you know, I'm talking about strategic planning, which is really what will it look like in 3 or 5 years. What most organisations are worried about is, are we going to survive to the end of this year? And if we do, are we still going to be around at the end of next year? How is that going to look? For some organisations, they will. They've got the money, they've got the skills. Some others might have a different experience. And it is just impossible at the moment to really have an understanding of what the future looks like, because I don't know if you can, you know, remember back in the ancient history of COVID 3 weeks ago, when we had a stage 1 and a stage 2 and a stage 3, and certain things were absolutely going to happen. And then things started to happen earlier and all the rules within the stages changed. So how can you possibly project out 3 years in terms of a strategic plan? I think at the moment you simply can't. So we'll talk about all of those things as well. But hopefully when we do return, I've said a few times in future slides, it's a new normal. And I think that's the key. If you take away nothing from tonight, It's the new normal. You're not going to return to how it used to be. None of us will be able to do that. Not in the short term. Sure, maybe in 3 to 5 years we will. So what will normal look like? We don't really know. How long will the crisis last? We don't really know. What will we find on the other side? We don't really know. Okay, so let's try and plan for the next 2 years, but we'll get there. I'm going to give you some ideas, I hope. And for me, it's just always going back to the system. If you've got a good system, it will be able to flex and move and innovate, and you're always coming back to the right place. So with a strategic plan, the way you normally start to do it is that you have a look at your organisation's mission or vision and values. We don't have time to go through all of that, but what I want to focus on is, if you like, your mission. They might be expressed as objectives in your constitution, or you might have them in an existing strategic plan. And it might say something like, if you're a sporting organisation, you're going to make sport available for everyone. What this review might look like is, after discovery and all the steps that we'll go through, you cannot make sport available for everybody the way that you used to. And you might have to decide, are we going to make it available at all? And if we are, who are we going to prioritise? And some of those things aren't even in your control. A lot of the sports have released their return to play industry plans over the last week or two. And many of those organisations have rules that are above what the Chief Medical Officer has required. So to give you an example, I believe that in Junior Rugby League, volunteers over 65 are not allowed in stage 2 and possibly even in stage 3. So I could be specifically wrong there, but that's what I've been told. I did try and check it out today. But if there are rules like that, what I mean is many of the volunteers in Junior Rugby League are grandparents, or the people who take the children to sport are grandparents. And because of that rule, they actually can't participate. And that's going to impact on whether you can make sport available for all. If you provide services to the aged, just another example you might have in your constitution, it might not be possible for you to do that under COVID, or you're going to have to radically change the way that you do that. I'll be doing a similar sort of webinar in the next couple of weeks for U3A, one of my favourite organisations. And, you know, just thinking about the challenges today of getting a U3A back to providing education to seniors, they've got some very specific challenges that they'll have to grapple with. And running education programs, thinking even about U3A, but really anytime you want to hold a seminar or bring a group of people together, if that's what you do, you may not have the space that you need to do that. And that's all around this sort of new rule of, now we don't have a gathering rule. I'm not sure if you all really got that message on Friday. So up to now, we've had stages. You know, you can have 20 people in stage 1 and 50 people in stage 2, or 100 people in stage 2, and then 500 people in stage 3, whatever it was. It's irrelevant now because there is no rule about a gathering other than one person for every 4 square meters. So again, had you done what is it going to look like for our club a week ago, it would look completely different this week because of that change to the rules. Did you all know about that? You can nod or shake your head. Right, so it's a very complex and ever-changing environment. So that's the first question for me. Can we still do what our objects tell us that we're here to do? And if you say, yes, I think we can do something, then it's right to move on. Thinking about it, assessing the issues, this is where I'm going to spend a little bit of time tonight. So just sort of taking you through, I suppose, those things. COVID is changing, and it's been manageable, I think, for many clubs because you're not open. So you're not having to have changes every week that are completely different, but you're probably planning, and so that's a challenge. Planning used to be done every 3 to 5 years. Now I think you almost have to do it almost daily. Perhaps that's an exaggeration, but there might be some things that will change daily. So on Friday it was okay. On Monday we've got a different set of rules. It's something to think about in terms of your capability, the volunteers that you have, and whether it's not a simpler solution to delay actually getting back. And that might be something you identify in your strategic plan. That just at the moment, until we have some certainty, perhaps in July or August, it's probably not worth doing very much other than planning the return. If you don't have the skills that you need to be able to analyze these things and be prepared to change all the time, then you might decide to sleep. And that's really what I was talking about earlier. By sleeping, I mean, you are going to go back. There will be life after the next couple of months, but maybe it's not as urgent as you are being led to believe that it is, because certainly in terms of, for example, Junior Rugby League, because those competitions relate to lots of other places, you know, they play competitions against lots of other places. Whole regions of Queensland have decided that they're not going back this year. And that's happening across a lot of different sports and a lot of different community organisations, where the governing bodies are saying you can go back, but the volunteers who are having to roll out the activities are saying we just can't. Given the guidelines that you've sent to us, we're just going to sleep this year in the hope that we can open up again next year and it'll be much closer to a normal situation. But that has an impact as well, a strategic one, particularly because if we're always worried about losing members, aren't we? And it's a legitimate fear. And so that's the danger if we decide to sleep. Sleeping doesn't mean that you close the club and don't do anything. It might mean that you close the club and don't provide activity, but you stay in touch with your members. We'll talk about that as well. I liked this sort of information because it's really talking about your capability in your club, you know, and what's happening now is all about leadership. We're seeing examples of good leadership and terrible leadership and everything in between. In the not-for-profit arena, we need to think about the organisation and the volunteer. We put a lot of pressure on our volunteers anyway, but now the temptation could be to put far more pressure on the 5 people in the club who do everything to try and support the hundreds of people in the club that often do nothing. So it really is about thinking about safety first. And safety isn't only, we don't want our volunteers tripping while they're putting tape on the floor outside the canteen or coffee area. Safety is all about understanding that people are under stress and we need to make sure they've got the skills they need to do the volunteering job for us. And so being careful of people is important right now. I had a really interesting conversation today, which I'll segue a little bit to, which was really just around hugging and how, you know, not everybody is a hugger. Some people definitely are huggers. I'm probably in the middle. I can do with a handshake or a hug, but you miss a hug. And for some people in society, that's the only physical contact that they have. And that's definitely a case for elderly people, for single people like me. So that's sort of, you know, the physicality of hugging or shaking hands or just touching someone on the shoulder is really missed at the moment by those people who don't have an outlet for it in their lives. And the only way you can replace that for your volunteers right now is to say, are you okay? Thanks for your help. We really care about you. Is there anything you need? And so you need to think about that extra burden when you're thinking about your strategic plans for the future. Okay. Thinking about what skills you've got in your team. Do you have a team that's able to just change instantly? I attended an AGM actually on the weekend, which was a face-to-face AGM. Because, of course, at a community AGM, you really only need space for 4 or 5 people. It's very rare to have hundreds who want to turn up. Good on you if you have one like that. But this committee, they just asked me to chair the electoral process, which I was happy to do. And they had to make a decision, which was, if they return, do they return on a Saturday or a Sunday? They spent 1 hour and 45 minutes on that conversation and then deferred it to the following meeting. I can tell you that sort of, and I told them, that sort of decision-making process is not going to be possible in a post-COVID environment. You really do not have the luxury of deferring decisions for a month, talking about them for 2 hours, and then putting it off for another month when it's a one way or another kind of meeting. So considering the culture that you've got in the club and how the decision-making happens, is it fast? Are you working together? Can you move if you need to, or is it going to be difficult? All just important things to inform yourself of. So this is assessing those internal and external issues. Making some assumptions about the future. For me, it's really looking to the money. And I can see most of you, is money an issue that you're concerned about? Do you all feel like, yes, you're worried you don't have enough money to go back? Or no, we've got plenty of money? Can I have your phone number? No. So for me though, that's the main decision about strategically, are we going to have enough money to do what we want to do? It's important to think about those sort of sources of revenue. Will they be the same? If you're a club that lives off advertising and sponsorship and events, they absolutely will not be the same. And I think I mentioned last workshop, my organisation is now like $500,000 down in lost revenue from events. So last quarter it was 250,000, now it's $500,000. I know your numbers aren't as big, but they're just the same. It really doesn't matter whether you're a tiny club or a big one. It will have an impact. And for those events, strategically, it's a good example. Let me share that with you. So strategically, one of our strategic goals is that we inform and educate our members and we build a network between our members. So that's a strategic goal. In our strategic plan, we've identified a range of events that we've agreed to hold. Now, we can't hold them certainly the way we used to. We won't have a new normal in terms of large community events probably for another year or two. And so the strategic decision is, can we hold them? Yes, but we have to drastically modify how we hold them. And then we have to try and find a way to be able to pay to hold them when all of our models are built around selling to sponsors who like everybody to be in the same place, who like to stand in a booth and sell their products and services. So you see what I mean by how complex this decision to move forward can be. It's a no-brainer to say we'll do something online. It's much more challenging to say, and we're going to be able to get money out of a poor economy, out of sponsors that are financially stressed, and where we can't prove value because we've never done it before. But where there's a will, there's a way, and I'm sure that you will all find it too. Almost every club that I know of has not been the beneficiary of $1 million donation that they're sitting around a pool living off. I'm very well aware that you all know how to work hard to raise money and find funds and provide services on the smell of an oily rag. So I'm pretty sure at least you've got those skills, and I think you're going to need them. If, on the other hand, you've got a committee that's very inexperienced, that doesn't understand financial management, then that might be something you need to consider as well as a bar to changing your strategic goals. Speed matters. I've already talked about that. You have to really move much more quickly than we've been able to have the luxury of doing in the past. And while this is using business speak in that sort of startup mindset, what we're really talking about here is you're not going to have time to be super cautious. And if you use my example of that event, normally I would be required to write a 35-page risk assessment on the event and the risk to the organisation, a legislative compliance plan, a whole lot of different things. You'll have a smaller version of that for sure. In fact, if I take it back to community, I volunteer for a netball association, and we're considering at that level a whole bunch of things at the moment, and we just don't. We have to respond basically before the end of June to the members. So we've got 2 weeks to give an answer as to whether we're returning to sport or not. We don't have the luxury of a lot of analysis, a lot of discussion. We're having to move very quickly, and you'll have your version of that. You need to perhaps think about how people are working, because you need people to provide products and services or activities or programs, and you need people to run them for you and attend them. I thought this was interesting that most of the businesses who have continued to work through COVID, it's hard to find stats on community because they haven't really been working other than where they're supporting people in need. Those businesses that were surveyed in April, though, said that actually working remotely was more effective for them. And I've covered that in a few of these webinars now, where I think I love the idea of having Zoom meetings forever for community, because it's really hard. It's really difficult to go from work to a 3-hour meeting for your club and then go home and live a life. It's so much more friendly to be able to do it this way. But it doesn't work for everybody. So again, it's that constant balance. In terms of digital, obviously meeting online and webinars and these sorts of meetings are great, but that's not the only move to digital. So organisations that are talking about moving to digital are also just talking about data, surveying your members, being able to analyse what's happening really quickly. I will talk about surveys in a moment, but I think that is a key thing that you can do, where you get information from your members quickly to help inform a decision. So no more of this sort of suggestion box and in a couple of months we'll have a look at what's in there. It now has to be, okay, we're thinking about doing this thing. Here's a survey monkey. Please respond within 48 hours. And even if you only get a limited response, at least you've tried to engage. Engaging is really important as well. We really need to understand what members will value post-COVID and think about new ways to provide that. And it does so much matter what you do. I was working with actually a tennis club who was so keen to get back after COVID, and tennis was one of those sports that was allowed to go a little bit early because they could provide social distancing, and they actually went to the trouble of getting some special permissions and things. And on the first day that they were back, they were only allowed to have 20 people there. So let's say the first week they were back, they had 20 people at the court all the time, and they did everything they were supposed to do. And by week 2, they were getting half that many. And by week 3, they were really struggling to get 5 people to the court a day, let alone 20 at a time. And I see the frustration of that, because they asked the members, if we opened up, would you come back? They said, yes, we're all desperate to come back. And they probably were at the time. But one of the things that surveys are notorious for is almost giving you the answer that you want because of the way you ask the question or who you ask it of. So How do you find out what members want in a post-COVID world? It also goes back to that thing that the media is telling us people are busting to get back out there, but the members are telling us that they're nervous and worried. And you see that, you know, the response to people getting together to protest and all that sort of thing, whether you agree or not, the point I want to make is that there's a real feeling of nervousness that if we start bringing everybody back together, there could be a second wave, and that's a legitimate fear. So how's that going to impact on your club? Who's in it? Are they going to be worried about it? Thinking, this was another thought that I had, was just around, okay, getting back to normal isn't just about the people, it's also about the supply chains that we have and how easily they can be disrupted. So most returning organisations are having to appoint a COVID officer. So that's a brand new volunteer position who'll be responsible for making sure that the club is meeting its legal obligations under COVID. That's around providing hand sanitisation stations, making sure that there's the proper separation, making sure that you're following any industry plans. And it's a really big and complex job. But it also relies on a supply chain. What if you can't get soap or sanitizer because everybody's going back at once? What if you can't get cleaning products that allow you to kill virus? What if you can't get the normal things that you need, food and drink and other things, to sell in your canteens where you make money? We really have to be aware that those supply chains aren't working very well. Deliveries are delayed, and they probably will be for some time. And things will be more expensive, I can guarantee you. Anything that's about returning from COVID is going to cost a lot more than it did before COVID. Okay, this is really just about being agile. So remembering if something, because things are changing rapidly, you need to change. We've talked about that quite a bit now, I think. If you do have staff, and I know most of you don't, but our volunteers are staff as well, this is just all about how much can you help them do from home or remotely, because people are enjoying it. There are, though, about 30% of people who are working from home at the moment don't like it. They find it isolating and stressful. And so you really can't have one rule for everybody. You're going to, I think, have options as you return. And you should identify those options in your strategic plan. How can you bring your organisation back in an environment where the vaccine is yet to be found and economies are still reeling? So this is the key strategic question that you need to answer as a group. And if you focus there, again, we didn't mention it, I don't think, did we, Rachel? But the presentation will be available on the website as well as the video. So you'll be able to go through.
Yes, that's right. And I will send that link out to everyone that's registered. So they'll have all this information.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leisa.
Yes, so for me, this is the key question, because it goes to that new normal. Strategically, when we return, we probably won't be returning to life as it used to be unless a vaccine is available to us. So probably this year and probably next year, we're going to have to return in a different way. So that's really, for me, the most important part of strategic planning is assessing all of those issues, because you need your head in a very different space to think strategically. And this is an unusual strategic situation in that it's almost operational, it's immediate, what you're going to have to plan for. So prioritising people's safety and staying in touch with them. Again, this is such an important slide for you all. If you can follow these things, you'll be so much more successful. Reshape your strategy to keep being able to do some business. It doesn't matter if you only end up doing 1/10 of what you used to do, but there are some tricks you need to be aware of here, I'll tell you about. Communicate with all your stakeholders. Stay in touch with council if you're in a council building. Stay in touch with your landlord if you're somewhere else. stay in touch with your state organisations and all the people who fund you. Very important to keep in touch with all of them for your government support policies. And then building resilience is just all about making sure you're not overloading people and that you can change what you do very quickly. This is just the same thing expressed in a slightly different way. Well, so then we're at the big strategic decision. Can we do it? My advice would be, and I can't find a better way, but I'm keen to hear from you if you know one. And we were talking about this. So I said, well, we need to go out to the members and find out if they even want to come back, which is true. And then someone else on the committee said, yes, that's great, but don't we need to tell them what it will look like before they can decide if they want to come back? Which is also really true, because we're not going back to the old normal. What does the new normal look like? But then I went back to, well, that's true, but if we tell them what it looks like and we don't get enough to do that, then we have to go back and ask them again. And we can't find a resolution to that conundrum. So we've decided we're going to go and ask them, then we're going to design a program, then we're going to ask them again and see who's still around, who's up for a compromise program. This is really interesting, and it doesn't come only from sport, but insurance may be completely or almost fully refundable if you do not return. So again, this is an example from Junior Rugby League, and one of the reasons I think some of the clubs have gone that way. If they don't take the field, they'll receive 80% of their player insurance back. If they play even one game of football, they won't receive any refund, or their refund will be reduced to 30%. So there's a real financial reason why they may not want to come back. It's something that you might want to consider if you've got an organisation who's giving you that sort of advice. Again, that comes down to money. Your refund policies, I've talked about it several times, but they have to be very carefully considered. Don't know if anybody saw Q&A last night, but if you didn't, you might want to have a look at that on iView. It was a really interesting, there was a very interesting part about sport and the management of sport and those different things. And refunds is a tricky one because strictly speaking, Australian consumer law says if you don't provide a season, if you've been paid for a season and you don't provide a season, then you should provide a refund. But that sometimes relies on other organisations that have taken some of that money, and they might be saying, well, we're not refunding our bit. So we've talked about that in the financial workshop as well. If you want more, maybe have a look at that recording. You might want to think about how your programs and activities can take place in the spaces that you've got. And this is another one where we got caught. So for our Netball Association, we have about 1,500 people turn up on a Saturday. That's obviously no longer possible. And so that informs it. But at the moment, Victoria is asking their Chief Medical Officer to waive the 1 person in every 4 metre rule and break it down to 1 person in every 2 square metre rule. So that hasn't been approved yet, but it's just an example of how you go to all this trouble. So let's say that you can fit under 4 square metres and COVID, you can only fit 20 people. So you plan it that way. But then you can fit up to 100 if you've got the space. But at 4 square metres, you can still only fit 20 people because 20 times 4 square metres is as big as your shed. But then if they reduce that to 2 square metres, you can fit in double the amount of people. And it's just an example of how quickly these things can change. But I suppose ultimately, if you can design any kind of a program that works in your space and works financially, then any changes that are positive can only do you a favour. So if you can make it work at 1 person every 4 square metres, if they change that rule, then you'll still be fine. But you do need to measure, and that gets complex as well. What is a gathering? A gathering in a building Again, that hasn't changed. So if you want to have a look at the initial webinar that we did on that, we talk there about how to measure rooms and then how to measure people in spaces. And then finally, you have to think about how many of your volunteers will return. Because as I mentioned, some volunteers may not be able to return. There might be rules that preclude them. Their health or their age might preclude them. And so there's no point planning a program and then having to say, well, that would be really good, but we've got no one to run it or no one to teach it. So can you do it? And then if you can't do it, how do you cancel? This is actually just a great video that I was sent today from Junior Rugby League in Central Queensland, and it's the president just speaking face to face to the members to say, we're really sorry, we've done everything that we can, we've looked at it every way we can, and there is just no way we can deliver a program this year. So we love you all. We've got really good business reasons for why we can't do it. We've also talked to our members and found out that we can't do it. There's no point out there asking someone to drive for 3 hours to take a child to a football game that they're not allowed to watch, and then perhaps having to stick around for another football game that they're not allowed to watch and then drive 3 hours home. So what I liked about that video was they were just telling the truth. And that's leadership right now. Of course, there'll be some people that are bitterly disappointed that you can't go ahead and provide the services that you always have. But all you need to do is say, we've tried hard. If you've got a better idea, let me know. But at the moment, we can't do it.
Sorry, Leisa, just on that note, we've just got a comment here that that we've heard that some volunteers aren't returning, which we discussed, and this is quite scary, but how can we entice them back?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Yeah, and with everything that we've covered tonight, it's
right. I suppose the first question is, could they come back even if they wanted to? And I would be intrigued to know why they aren't coming back. I suspect that they're worried, about their health, or it's financial. If it's financial, then strategically there probably is something that you can do, in that if you can offer to help cover the costs of volunteering, which is something I've been advocating for a long time anyway, that might help you get them back. So we're not talking here about paying volunteers to come back, but I guess I'm talking about if it's a matter of bus fare or a bit of petrol or some other reason that means that they are not coming back, then I would consider trying to find a way to fund helping them out. But first of all, it's finding out. I was talking to an organisation today who have lost a really key volunteer, and they said, oh, and she's got family issues, so she had to resign. And I always question that, not that that's a very legitimate reason, but I wanted to really find out more. And so I asked if I could give her a call, and she was actually very open with me that she had a completely different range of issues. So volunteers aren't always honest about why they're not coming back. This is why I love a personal conversation. Of course, it depends for that club that's asking, have you lost 20 or have you lost 5? But I still think, ask them why they're leaving, the ones that are leaving. Ask them if there's anything that you could provide that would make them change that decision. But also remember, just at the moment, one of the opportunities I think in the current environment is that there are people who are at home who might be wanting to get out, but they'll be short-term volunteers. So pairs of hands that can turn up and do things, but may not want to take on big roles and stick around. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's probably the things that I would try first. And of course, assuring them that you're going to do everything you can to keep them safe while they're with you, if that's an issue too. So thinking about the planning process, if you were doing a strategic plan now from scratch, you would do something called a SWOT analysis. And I'm going to send Rachel a template to put up on the website, which is a template strategic plan if you want to have a go. And in it, if you haven't already done it, is just strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. the way I express that, because I don't like corporate speak in community, is just, what are we good at? What are we not good at? What should we be worried about? And what should we be working on? And I think now, if I had to take one thing out of the whole process for you to do now, a SWOT would be the thing to do now, because it will look different to how it did 3 months ago. What are you good at now? Well, it would be very little probably for a lot of us. We're not providing services or activities or any of those things, but we're still really good. We've got good skills on board. What are we not so good at? Well, we're going to have some problems with volunteering because people are worried, or the whole world looks different now. We don't even know if we could have, someone at a saw to show someone else how to use a saw, which is the whole reason that we exist. So what are our things we should be worried about? Well, obviously, maybe we've got older people in our membership. Maybe we've got people who are reluctant to return. Maybe people just don't want to come back this year. They want a break because they've gotten used to Netflix days and nights. And what are the things we really want to be working on? And it's those opportunities that will turn into your new plan for coming back. And it should be a range of things that you can do over the coming 18 months before you can sort of review your plan again and start getting back to the sort of new normal. Now, once you've gone through that, and again, I will sort of show you the plan before I finish, prioritizing your goals is the most important thing when you plan, no matter what you do. So you'll get a long list of things you'd like to do. Then you have to be brutally realistic and say, well, there's 20 things here and we don't want to take anything off the list, but we can really only do 3. The way that I like to do that is give it to everybody and ask them to prioritize it, 1 to 4. Is it a priority 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then you'll get a common idea of, okay, most people think that this is a priority 1. So that's staying on the list. That's a very simple explanation of how to do that. I said 6 to 10 goals there. I'm going to retract that immediately and say, no, I think just trying to find 3 things that you can do very well at the moment would be an excellent strategic plan to have for this year, and maybe another 6 things that you could do next year. And that includes everything, your activities, funding, absolutely everything you want to do, because you may have less bodies on the ground to help you do it. All right, and then you normally will write out the plan, and I'm going to give you that template, which I hope will help. And then, of course, you have to roll it out. So I just want to quickly take you through. I will talk about reviewing them. Measures are really important normally for planning. So a measure would be, I think I've given you some examples here. People are enjoying the arts. Well, that's not really a measure, but 75% of surveyed members say they're more satisfied now than they were. That's a measure. So when you're deciding on these goals, you also need to just find a way to measure whether it's worked or not, or what the result has been, and then you review the measure. I want to show you SurveyMonkey because I think building interest in this process is important. And even though I've said you have to move really fast, you do have time to use some of this technology if you've got the skills to do it. If you don't, I've said this lots of times, find a 12-year-old and they'll be able to do it beautifully for you and far better than you ever could. So SurveyMonkey is one of the pieces of software that you might use. My netball association's just sent out this one. So I'm just sharing a couple of questions. How do you feel about us not having a season? You know, we really like it, we really don't like it. Are you still interested in being involved in netball this season, regardless of whether it's uncertain or not? And that's a yes or no, or I'm not sure. Are you open to changing the game day format? Please tick all the things you'd be happy with. So we may not have got the questions perfectly right. And I would say I haven't done this survey. Some of the other members of my team did this survey, and I think it's fantastic. I couldn't think how I could improve it. They've done it brilliantly. And we're just trying to find out, if we change it completely, will anybody still even want to play? Because that's an important decision. And again, we have to make that by the 30th of June. So all of that's important. I'm not sure if is there another question, Rachel, or are we good? I just saw a little number come up.
Sorry, it
Microphone?
helps if I unmute myself, doesn't it? It just says quick polls are great.
Yes, that's another good idea. Thank you. Yes, quick polls are a terrific idea. You can even, if you use Outlook, put a poll in Outlook really easily and just send out an email and say, is this a good idea or a bad idea? I really advocate doing that anyway, because I'd rather do that than have a general meeting every month. You know, find another way to ask the members, I think is a really good system, particularly now when you think about changing things. So yes, polls and surveys, all of those things will help inform you. And then you really will make a decision, or you'll be less at risk of making a bad decision. When you've made that strategic plan, though, you need to tell everybody about it. And again, I think that's a key thing that some clubs miss. So send it to council, send it to state government, send it to everybody that you deal with, and send it to your members so that they can all see what your strategic goals are, particularly if they're going to be completely different. And then finally, for most of you, because you've got that dual role that we started with at the beginning, it's really thinking about now the operational side of that. So I like Gantt charts, and I know this is a difficult graphic to see, but a Gantt chart is essentially a spreadsheet, and you can use Excel or you can use something else. And widget whackers is the sport that I invented. It doesn't really exist. But this is going through the strategic plan, and see, we've identified things that are urgent are red, things that are not so urgent are orange, and things that aren't urgent are yellow. So, but if you had nothing else to look at in terms of all the things that we want to do in our strategic plan, you can probably see, I hope you can see, although you might not be able to read the letters, that April looks really rough. So there's 1 month there where there's a whole lot of deadlines in April. And this is what I like about it. When you put an operational plan together this way, you get to be able to say, well, that's not going to work. We don't have the human resources or the financial resources to get everything done in April. So we need to rethink our plan and rethink our deadlines. We've either got to lose something or we've got to adjust our deadlines that sort of result from that. Now, I'll also send you this spreadsheet so you can see exactly what I mean. And the front spreadsheet informs this Gantt chart. So you can just have a look at it. It's still going to look complex, but all you need to think is we need a list, we need a due date, and we need to work out if that's going to be a problem.
Sorry, Lisa. Jim's just asked, we were talking about the polls and surveys.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way you can obtain or, buy or something through online workshopping? Like, can you get something, a template or something like that through online for polls and surveys? You've got the Survey Monkey, but
right. So
is that sort of what you're referring to, Jim? Sorry, I'll unmute you for a sec.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yes, sorry.
Yes. No, what I was after is getting collaboration and buy-in as you go and you're developing the whole strategy. My concern is, particularly perhaps in the new norm, it's going to be quite difficult to get people together to do what traditionally I would have done, developing strategic plans, which is workshop. And there'd be a number of workshops as you develop the plan so that when you got to the end of it, you'd picked up all the pros and cons and people felt they'd made a contribution. And therefore, you had buy-in to the plan by the time you got to the end. My concern is that in the new norm, workshopping is difficult in a modern organization, but it would be even more difficult in a not-for-profit organization where the members rarely meet except for the AGM. Have you got any tips on how you could, as you go, build up the plan with the buy-in of all the stakeholders?
That's a really good question, Jim. Thank you. And yes, I do have some suggestions. You're quite right in saying that it's going to be very difficult to do this traditionally with workshops and with a series of engagement over 6 months, because realistically, you probably have at most 6 weeks to deliver, a plan that's going to speak to the next 18 months, at least the next 6 months. I might be being hyperbolic there, but things like SurveyMonkey, I think, are a great way. So I've got a SurveyMonkey template that I can share, and SurveyMonkey is free. There is a free version of it. If you want a lot more functionality, you might have to pay for it, but the free version is pretty good for most clubs. And you can ask those questions. What are we good at? What are we not so great at? So you can do your SWOT certainly that way. Are there wishes that you've got? There might be other questions. And what I would suggest, though, is that rather than doing a great big survey and sending it out, that you send out chunks of it every week or every few days. So, this week, can you tell us what you think we're good at? Or this week, can you tell us if you're planning to volunteer? And if you're not, so just 3 or 4 questions at most each week for members to answer. But also remembering not everybody's online. I understand that as well. And we have to be cautious of that and make sure that we're bringing those other people with us. So the first question in your survey might be, how do you want us to engage with you? Are you happy for us to send you emails? Will you participate in an online survey, or do you want us to post you things in the mail? And then that's going to delay you again a little bit as well. But it's again just giving people the opportunity, and maybe what that would mean is that the mail version that you're going to post out is all of the questions, but you're only going to post it out once, and you're going to ask for it all to come back at the end of the month of engagement. So I want to go on and show you just an example plan so you can have a look. But what I hope we've covered is, how to just have a look at your plan. And if you don't have one now, go to your constitution, remind yourself about what it says about what you're supposed to be doing with your organisation. Think about the future, the new norm, what that's going to look like, what the challenges are going to be for you. So that's assessing the internal and external issues. How do you then re-energize those members and get them coming back? So even though they might say that they do want to come back, can you trust them? Are they going to change their mind in a couple of weeks' time? It's going to be difficult to find answers to that. And that might come back to whether you've got a refund or not and all sorts of things. I think you need to show them what it might look like, and careful in that communication. This is what we think it might look like, but we need your advice to help us decide what it will look like. That's the message. And then how do you do a plan if you've never done one? Let me just come out. I know you're still sharing my screen, I hope. So you should be able to see this Word document now. Rachel, can you nod? Are you seeing this? You're not seeing?
Sorry, no, we can still see the last bit of the presentation.
Oh, okay. So let me I might just have to come back, go back and come back and whatever that, I don't even know what I'm saying now, sort of wobbling along. So how's that? Got that now? Widget whackers, misspelled because I just put a H in there by mistake. So this is a template that I always use. You might not like it. I like it for community organisations because it's really simple. And I've given you some example words. So please don't just copy and paste your club's name in this. It won't work unless you play widget whacking. But it's just to give you an idea, why do you exist? How do you want your club to look? What values are really important to you? Who are the people who are important, your stakeholders? A little bit about the story. So I should be able to pick up any club strategic plan and pretty much know about who they are, what they want, what their dreams are. Our thoughts and ideas is how I describe that SWOT analysis. So this is any community organisation will probably get most of these things. And you include that in your plan because it's good to go back to later. What are our dreams? So these are essentially things that we'd like to have if we had all the money in the world. This is our wish list, is another way that I express it. And again, some of those will relate to you. This is just the process. You don't have to change that. But here's now our priority levels. So priority areas. So we want to, in this club, increase participation, develop great leaders, become commercially sustainable, and achieve positive recognition. So if I was reviewing this plan right now in a COVID world, can we increase participation at all levels right now? No. No, realistically, we probably in our organisation can't do that. So that might be a strategic goal that we have to sacrifice. But maybe we can increase participation in some levels, or maybe our revised plan will just be that we can have any kind of participation at any level. Develop great leaders in sport. Well, that's something we don't have to let go of. We can keep doing that. We might not have the financial resources to do it, but there's a lot of free training available at the moment, so we can pivot there. Become commercially sustainable. Now's not a good time to look at that. This is a classic example, actually, of a plan that was written earlier. But maybe there is a way that we can review what we do in the future to start banking some of our money, so we do have that 2 years of expenses put away somewhere forever. And can we achieve positive recognition? Well, that's probably one we don't need to change, but how we do it might be different. So just to show you again, and then I'll finish because I'm a little bit late, my apologies. Your priority area, then your strategies are what you're going to do. Your measures are how you're going to see if you actually did it. And when you see this, it'll make complete sense. It's a really simple process. And then finally, this is your operational plan. So if we're going to try and get grants and funding, what are all the little steps we have to do? Finally, who's going to do them and when are we going to do them by? So I hope this is a really simple tool for you all to be able to write a plan. Have you got any questions, burning questions that you need to have answered?
I just wanted to mention, I'll start unmuting everyone, but look, if people do require assistance, with the strategic plan, please email us at comdev@noosa.queensland or qld.gov.au. I will send that out with the link to everyone who needs assistance or help with anything like that. So just to reassure them there.
Can I give everyone a tip?
Yes.
I was fortunate enough to dip into the Atlassian website. Atlassian are the hugely successful Australian startup company, not far from here, now international, big success story. And they have in their website all sorts of free playlists as to how they develop their plans and ideas and how they come together and build a team culture within the organization when they have ideas and things that they want to get on the table. And they've got some little games and things that they've actually developed within there. And it's an absolutely fascinating site. It's their website for Atlassian, Atlassian. I recommend it to everyone if they want to see how a modern organization that is going places has developed its ideas and its strategic plans.
Thank you, Jim. I apologise to you all. I am running a little bit late and I try never to do that. I'm blaming Rachel, really, because we started a bit late. No, I mean, one of the challenges for me is just because I literally write these workshops on the day that we do them, it's really hard to get the timing right. But if you think of any questions that I haven't answered, please just send them through. The council probably can answer them anyway, but if they can't, I'll get in touch.
Yeah. And
thanks again, my loyal band of followers. I appreciate it. I think we've got one more.